Part 5, Jolene's Song, Chapter 21, The Slow Thaw. The incident of the shattered dishes became a quiet turning point. The act of cleaning up the mess together had broken something else, the thick wall of tension that had separated Danny from the rest of the diner staff. Things didn't change overnight, but the chill in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile, tentative warmth. Danny stopped working with his shoulders hunched, as if expecting a blow. He started to meet their eyes. He even on occasion offered a wry, crooked smile that was so much like his father's, yet entirely his own. He learned the rhythm of the kitchen, the unspoken language of the lunch rush. He learned to anticipate Alice's need for a clean spatula, to have a fresh pot of coffee ready before Jolene had to ask, and to understand Vera's complex, often contradictory orders. Vera, in turn, took him on as a personal project. She started leaving nature magazines for him in the break room and would offer him unsolicited advice on everything from the proper care of his hamster, he didn't have one, to the migratory patterns of the North American songbird. It was her way of including him, of weaving him into the fabric of their lives. Jolene's skepticism was a harder nut to crack. She still watched him, her eyes missing nothing, but her observations became less about looking for signs of trouble and more about simple curiosity. One afternoon, she saw him sketching on a napkin during a lull. He quickly hid it when he saw her looking, but not before she caught a glimpse of a surprisingly detailed and lifelike drawing of Mel's grumpy bulldog face. The next day, she silently left a small sketch pad and a set of pencils by the dish station. He never mentioned it, but the quality of his napkin art improved dramatically. Mel's relationship with Danny remained the most complicated. The constant barking softened, though it never disappeared entirely. It became less the anger of a warden and more the grumbling of a reluctant mentor. One morning, Mel found Danny struggling to fix the notoriously finicky milkshake machine. After watching him fumble for a few minutes, Mel pushed him aside with a gruff "gimme that" and proceeded to explain the machine's inner workings with the intricate detail of a watchmaker. It was the longest conversation they'd ever had. As Mel finished, he clapped Danny on the shoulder, a brief, awkward gesture that was as startling and significant as a solar eclipse. Slowly, painstakingly, Danny was becoming one of them. The shadow of his father was receding, replaced by the image of a quiet, watchful young man with a surprising talent for drawing and an unexpected resilience. The diner was healing the fractures from Mel's past, slowly mending, reinforced by the shared daily work of making coffee, flipping burgers, and occasionally cleaning up a spectacular mess. Chapter 22, The Songwriter. Into this newly forged piece walked a man with a guitar case and a smile that could charm a snake out of its skin. He slid onto a stool at the counter one slow Wednesday afternoon, his worn denim jacket and scuffed cowboy boots marking him as a traveler. "Afternoon, ladies," he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum with a hint of a Tennessee accent. He nodded at Jolene, who was wiping down the counter. "A woman as pretty as you shouldn't have to work so hard." Jolene, who had heard every line in the book twice, didn't miss a beat. "And a man who looks like you should know better than to use a line that old," she shot back, but there was a hint of a smile playing on her lips. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to fill the quiet diner. "Fair enough. The name's Cash. Just passing through on my way to a meeting. Coffee black, if you please." He had a way about him, an easy confidence that was different from the usual truck stop bravado. He didn't pry or push, just sat with his coffee occasionally, jotting down notes in a small leather-bound book. The conversation started naturally, a slow back and forth of witty banter and sharp comebacks. He told her he was a songwriter chasing a dream from Nashville to L.A. He spoke of smoky bars and lonely highways of heartbreak and hope, all with a poet's flair and a self-deprecating humor that Jolene found surprisingly disarming. He seemed to see past her carefully constructed walls of cynicism. He didn't just listen to her words, he heard the music underneath the sharp wit that masked a deep intelligence, the southern drawl that carried echoes of a life she'd left behind. When he left an hour later, he placed a $5 bill on the counter for a $1 coffee. For the conversation, he said with a wink, it was worth every penny. As he walked out the door, Jolene found herself watching him go, a strange, unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Chapter 23, Ampere's Different Tune Cash became a regular over the next week. He'd come in each afternoon, take the same stool, and talk to Jolene for hours. The rest of the diner staff watched the courtship unfold with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. They had never seen Jolene like this. The sharp edges of her personality seemed to soften in his presence. She laughed more, her guard lowered, and a genuine, unguarded happiness shone in her eyes. He'd bring his guitar in sometimes and play her a new song he was working on. His voice wasn't perfect, but it was full of a raw, honest emotion that captivated her. He wrote songs about lost love and second chances, about finding beauty in the broken places. It felt like he was writing the soundtrack to her own guarded heart. One evening, he took her to a small local bar with an open mic night. He got up on stage and, looking directly at her, sang a song he said he'd just written. It was about a firefly from Belle, West Virginia, who shone brighter than all the city lights. It was clumsy and cheesy, but it was for her. And in that moment, Jolene felt a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Alice was happy for her friend, but a small, persistent voice of doubt nagged at the back of her mind. Cash was almost too perfect. His stories were seamless, his charm effortless. It felt practiced. Don't you think it's a little strange that a big-shot songwriter from Nashville would spend all his time in a greasy spoon in Phoenix? She asked Mel one evening as they watched Jolene and Cash leave the diner together, laughing. What you think he should be eating at one of those fancy places with the tiny food and the big bills, Mel grumbled. The man has good taste. He likes my chili. But even Mel seemed to be watching the unfolding romance with a paternal, if grumpy, concern. Jolene was one of his, and this stranger, with his easy smile and sad songs, was an unknown quantity. The Diner family had just weathered one storm from the past. Alice couldn't shake the feeling that another one was brewing on the horizon. Chapter 24, The Sour. Note Alice's unease about Cash solidified into tangible suspicion a few days later. It was a small thing. Cash had left his leather-bound notebook on the counter by mistake. Jolene had set it aside for him, but not before Alice noticed a business card tucked into the front flap. It wasn't for a music publisher or a recording studio. It was for a high-end real estate development firm, Sonora & Son Properties, building the future of Phoenix. That's odd, Alice said, pointing it out to Mel when Jolene was in the back. I thought he was a starving artist, not a land developer. Mel squinted at the card. Maybe it's his cousins, he suggested, though a flicker of doubt crossed his own face. Or maybe he's writing a song about real estate. You know my foundation is crumbling and my heart's in foreclosure. The explanation didn't sit right with Alice. That afternoon, she made an excuse to run an errand and drove by the address on the card. It was a sleek modern office building downtown, a world away from the dusty bars and lonely highways of Cash's stories. On a large sign out front under the company logo was a list of the firm's executives. And there, under VP of Acquisitions, was a name that made her stomach clench: C. Randall Bishop. She knew with a certainty that was cold and absolute that C. Randall Bishop was their songwriter, Cash. Her mind raced on the drive back to the diner. Why would a successful real estate executive pose as a down-on-his-luck songwriter? What did he want with Jolene? The answer came to her as she turned the corner onto the diner street. She looked at the familiar, slightly shabby building, then at the property surrounding it, a laundromat, a small auto body shop, a vacant lot overgrown with weeds. It was prime real estate, an entire block of underdeveloped land, and Mel's Diner was sitting right in the middle of it. Sonora & Son Properties wasn't interested in Jolene's heart. They were interested in the ground beneath her feet. And Cash, or C. Randall Bishop, wasn't writing a love song. He was scouting the location. Chapter 25, Unmasking the Melody. Alice wrestled with her discovery. To tell Jolene would be to break her heart. To stay silent felt like a betrayal. She decided she needed proof, something undeniable that would force the truth into the open. The opportunity came that Friday. Cash had invited Jolene to a company picnic for the small independent record label he claimed was interested in his music. He was vague on the details, but Jolene was ecstatic, convinced this was his big break. He wants me to meet everyone, she'd gushed to Alice and Vera. He said he wants them to see who he's been writing all those songs about. Alice, armed with the address Jolene had scribbled down, decided to crash the party. She told the others she was meeting an old friend. Mel, sensing something was afoot, just grunted and told her not to be late for the dinner rush. The address wasn't a park or a rustic barbecue spot. It was a sprawling, luxurious country club. Alice felt decidedly out of place in her sensible sedan as she pulled up behind a line of Mercedes and BMWs. She could see the picnic on a large manicured lawn overlooking a golf course. It was a corporate event, men in expensive polo shirts and women in designer sundresses mingling over champagne and canapes. She spotted them near a large white tent. Jolene looked beautiful, but visibly uncomfortable, a wildflower in a meticulously arranged bouquet. Cash was at her side, though he looked different here. His easy charm had been replaced by a sharper, more polished confidence. He was C. Randall Bishop, VP of Acquisitions in his natural habitat. He was holding court, gesturing expansively at the surrounding landscape. And then Alice saw what he was pointing at, a large architectural rendering on an easel. Alice moved closer, staying behind a large potted ficus tree. She could hear his voice, no longer the gentle, gravelly hum of a songwriter, but the slick, persuasive pitch of a salesman. And as you can see, the cornerstone of the entire Sonoran Gateway project is the acquisition of this central block. The diner, the laundromat, they're the last holdouts. But I'm confident we'll be breaking ground within the next 6 months. A man in a golf shirt clapped him on the back. I hear you've been doing some creative on the ground research, Randall, getting friendly with the natives. Cash Randall laughed. You have to know the territory, Bob. And the waitress is proving to be a very informative asset. A little bit of country charm goes a long way. The words hit Alice like a slap. He wasn't just deceiving Jolene, he was mocking her, using her as a pawn in his corporate game. The cruelty of it, the cold, calculated way he had preyed on her hopes filled Alice with a white-hot rage. She watched as Jolene, who had been trying to follow the conversation, finally looked at the architectural rendering. Her eyes traced the sleek lines of the proposed development, a massive generic complex of shops and condos. And then she saw it. Right in the center of the drawing, where Mel's Diner should have been, was a perfectly rendered fountain. The color drained from Jolene's face. The laughter, the music, the song he had written for her, it all coalesced into one devastating lie. She looked at the man beside her, the man she thought she was falling in love with, and saw him for what he was, a stranger in a costume, a smiling predator who saw her not as a firefly, but as an obstacle to be cleared. Chapter 26, The Confrontation. Jolene didn't make a scene. Her heartbreak was a quiet, implosive thing. She simply turned without a word and walked away. She walked past the champagne and the canapes, past the men in their polo, shirts her back, ramrod straight, her southern pride, a fragile shield against the utter humiliation of the moment. Cash Randall caught up to her at the edge of the parking lot, grabbing her arm. Jolene, wait, let me explain. Explain what she said, her voice dangerously calm. Explain how you were going to tell me that the diner was being torn down to make way for a fountain. Were you going to write a song about it, The Ballad of the Wrecking Ball? It's just business, he said, his practiced charm failing him for the first time. It has nothing to do with you and me. You and me, Jolene let out a short, bitter laugh. There is no you and me. There's just a real estate man and an informative asset. Now you take your hand off my arm before I inform you of what we do to snakes back in West Virginia. She pulled her arm away and kept walking. Just then Alice's sedan pulled up beside her. The passenger door swung open. Get in, Alice, said her voice firm. Jolene slid into the seat, her composure finally crumbling as the car pulled away, leaving C. Randall Bishop standing alone in the parking lot of his perfect manicured world. The drive back to the diner was silent, punctuated only by Jolene's quiet, choked sobs. There was nothing Alice could say that could fix the raw, gaping wound of the betrayal. All she could do was drive a steady presence beside her friend as her world fell apart. When they walked into the diner, Vera and Mel took one look at Jolene's face and knew. Vera immediately wrapped her in a hug, murmuring comforting nonsense. Mel, in a rare display of emotional intelligence, said nothing. He simply disappeared into the kitchen and returned a moment later with a plate. On it was a slice of his best slightly burned apple pie and a massive scoop of vanilla ice cream. He placed it in front of Jolene. Eat, he commanded gruffly. It's good for heartbreak. It was the diner's version of a group hug, their unspoken way of saying, we're here, you're one of us, and we will face this together. Chapter 27, Harmony Restored. The next afternoon, C. Randall Bishop, dressed in an expensive suit, walked into Mel's Diner. He was no longer Cash the songwriter. He was a businessman with a briefcase and an offer. He ignored the icy glares from Alice and Vera and addressed Mel directly. Mr. Sharples, he began placing a thick folder on the counter. Sonoran Sun Properties is prepared to make you a very generous offer for this location. Mel didn't even look at the folder. He just polished a glass, his movements slow and deliberate. Not interested, he said. Randall's professional smile faltered. I don't think you understand. This is a significant amount of money. Enough for you to retire, move to Florida, buy a boat. I hate boats, Mel said. They make me seasick. Look, Randall said his patience thinning. This development is happening. The rest of the block is already sold. You can either take this generous offer, or you can watch your property values plummet as we build around you. Eventually, we'll get the land through eminent domain. This is your only chance to walk away with a profit. It was at that moment that Jolene emerged from the kitchen, a fresh pot of coffee in her hand. She looked at Randall, her eyes clear and steady. There was no trace of the heartbroken woman from the day before. In her place was a woman forged in the fires of humiliation, and she had come out stronger. You know, Mr. Bishop, she said, her voice dripping with sweet Southern steel, you taught me something. You taught me that some things aren't for sale. She gestured around the slightly shabby diner. This place. It's more than just a piece of land. It's a home. It's a family. And you can't put a price on that. She walked up to him and poured a little coffee into his styrofoam cup. Now, this is what's going to happen. You're going to take your generous offer, and you're going to walk out that door. And if you or anyone from your fancy company ever sets foot in here again, I'll make sure that every food critic in Phoenix gets an anonymous tip about the secret ingredient in Mel's chili. She leaned in closer. And trust me, it's a lot worse than brandy. Randall looked from her unwavering gaze to Mel's stony face, to Alice's protective stance to Vera, who was brandishing a ketchup bottle like a weapon. He was a man who understood numbers and leverage, and he knew in that moment that he had none. He had underestimated them. He had mistaken their simplicity for weakness. He picked up his folder and walked out of the diner without another word. As the bell over the door jingled, a profound silence fell over the room. Then a slow smile spread across Mel's face. You know, for an informative asset, he said to Jolene, you're not half bad. Jolene smiled back, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. It's all that country charm, Mel. It goes a long way. The crisis was over. The songwriter was gone, but the song of the diner remained. It was a chaotic, sometimes dissonant, and often off-key melody, but it was their song. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like every note was in perfect harmony. Part 6 Vera's Vision, Chapter 28, Ampere's New Leaf. In the wake of the sea, Randall Bishop affair, a comfortable and hard-won peace settled over Mel's diner. The threat of the wrecking ball had receded, leaving them with a renewed sense of solidarity. Danny was no longer the brooding outsider, but a quiet, integral part of the kitchen's rhythm. Jolene, though, bearing the fresh scars of a broken heart, had rediscovered her fiery resilience, her wit, sharper than ever. The diner was their fortress, and for a time, it felt impenetrable. But the nature of a family, particularly one as eclectic as theirs, is to never remain static. The next catalyst for change came from the most unlikely of sources, Vera. It began subtly. A stack of brightly colored paperbacks started appearing on the break table with titles like Awaken Your Inner Sunshine and The Tao of Positive Living. Vera, who had always approached life with a sort of baffled optimism, now seemed to be pursuing happiness with the grim determination of a drill sergeant. She started her mornings with affirmations, which she would whisper to the salt shakers as she filled them. You are full of savory potential, she'd murmur. You will enhance the lives of others. What's with her, Mel grumbled to Alice one morning after Vera had congratulated the mop for its willingness to embrace filth and transform it into cleanliness. I think she's on a journey of self-improvement, Alice replied, flipping a pancake.